Monsieur Blanchet-Jean kind of sing us a tune, maybe later on. Calling the meeting to order. It's the meeting number 80 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Science and Research. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to standing orders. And we do have members on virtual as well as some of our witnesses today. So if you're on Zoom, you can choose your official language of your choice. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. So on the bottom of the screen, just choose floor, English, or French. If interpretation is lost, please let me know immediately, and we'll suspend until we get back to interpretation services being available. For members in person, just a normal meeting, we ask you to address through me, and I'll recognize you by name. Those in the room, your mic will be controlled as normal by the Proceedings and Verification Officer. Although this room is equipped with a powerful audio system, we also have to be very careful of the interpreters that we don't have our earphones near to our microphones so that we create feedback on them. If feedback does occur, take your earphone off immediately, but please let's stay away from having feedback for the sake of those using headphones. Reminder again that speaking slowly and clearly for our interpreters, and with regard to a speaking list, we do the best we can to maintain the order that we've been given, whether you're virtual or in person. So to get us started, pursuant to Standing Order 10831 and the motions adopted by the committee on Tuesday, January 30th and Thursday, February 15th, 2024, the committee resumes its study of the distribution of federal government funding amongst Canada's post-secondary institutions. It's now my pleasure to welcome Dr. Shannon Wagner, Vice President Research from Thompson Rivers University, here in person. And online we have from the University of Calgary, Dr. Ed McCauley, President and Vice Chancellor. And we have also online from Western University, Dr. Penny Pexman, Vice President of Research. Each individual has 5 minutes of opening remarks, and after that time, we'll go to questions. We'll start off with Dr. Wagner, please, for 5 minutes.
Like to ITEP, Shannon Wagner and Squest. Good morning. My name is Shannon Wagner, and I'm the Vice President Research at Thompson Rivers University in Kamloops, BC. Today, I'm here proudly representing small and mid-sized universities that are pushing the boundaries of knowledge to address regional, provincial, and national research questions and priorities. We are proud of our vibrant campus life and our commitment to open learning with nearly 29,000 students. We are very proud to be guests on the traditional territory of the Tk'emlúps te Secwépemc for our first house in Kamloops, and to Tehulk for our second house in Williams Lake, BC. Our relationship with our host First Nations guides us in our approach to all academic and research initiatives for our institution. Our university, while deeply committed to teaching and learning, has carved a niche in research creation and dissemination. Now recognized as among the top 50 research universities in Canada, TRU has shown notable growth, second in our tier in research and income. Our strategic research plan addresses key challenge areas that inform academic planning, which guides undergraduate, graduate, faculty education, and research. A flagship initiative at TRU is addressing the urgent need for research and education in wildfire. The establishment of the Institute for Wildfire Science, Adaptation and Resiliency under the scientific leadership of world-renowned wildfire researcher Dr. Mike Flanagan marked a significant step toward better understanding and managing the effects of wildfire. TRU and the province of British Columbia have partnered in a first-of-its-kind initiative to create an ecosystem for wildfire studies, including a state-of-the-art building which will house all aspects of wildfire, from basic training through to advanced research, so that research-informed training is an expectation rather than a goal. Equally important is our Knowledge Makers program, which empowers Indigenous students to engage with and contribute to academic scholarship, offering them a platform to be heard and recognized on an international stage. Collaboration with the UN Food and Agriculture Association showcased the power of Indigenous knowledge in addressing global challenges like food security, further highlighting the impactful work done by our students and faculty. These initiatives demonstrate the critical role small and mid-sized universities like TRU play in making a difference, regionally, nationally, and globally. The contribution of institutions like ours drives forward innovation, understanding, and change. To support this ongoing and valuable work, beyond our endorsement of the ACCRU's recommendations, I propose several enhancements which would boost the contributions of small and mid-sized research institutions. First, rethink funding models. Refocus the merit-based funding system to prioritize the quality and impact of research proposals by democratizing access to funding while reducing emphasis on an applicant's previous research success. Perhaps this could also be accomplished by creating funding calls, beyond special calls for early career, targeted to those who have not been previously funded. 2, level the research environment. Address disparities that preference applications from institutions where research infrastructure and ecosystems may be more plentiful, when those disparities do not present true barriers to successfully completing research. 3, focus on regional needs. Regional needs and the unique strengths, including relationships with community, are not always the easiest factors to account for in existing funding calls. Valuing these unique strengths and relationships researchers and institutions have with their communities will supercharge regional research ecosystems. 4th, and finally, promote collaboration. Encourage and facilitate interinstitutional partnerships to tackle national and global challenges. Programs like the recent NSERC Lab to Market, which required interinstitutional partners for eligibility, are excellent models for how to bring post-secondaries across Canada together. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present this morning, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wagner. Right on time. Now we'll go to Dr. Ed McCauley, President and Vice Chancellor at the University of Calgary. Welcome. You have 5 minutes, please.
Good morning from sunny Calgary and the traditional territories of the People of Treaty 7 region. We're also home to one of Canada's research-intensive universities. Since 2011, the University of Calgary has been intentionally growing our research capacity by focusing on impactful solutions that are beneficial to Canadians. By 2021, we became the youngest university in Canada's top 5 list of research universities, and we've one of the fastest rates of research funding growth, performing in the ranks of much larger or established institutions. Our research community consistently demonstrates excellence and transdisciplinary collaboration, some of the reasons why our external research funding continues to grow. For many years, the research performed at the University of Calgary and our sister institutions have made Canada more prosperous and healthier. We have done so in partnership with the federal government, which leverages further investment and helps us attract talent to solve some of Canada's pressing problems. A good example is our One Child, Every Child, Canada First Research Excellence program. At $125 million, it's one of the largest federal research grants to a university in Western Canada. We have leveraged this funding to attract other partners, to build a $268 million research and innovation ecosystem with our community and industry that will dramatically improve health outcomes for children and youth across the country. We are grateful for the support of the federal government as it creates leveraging opportunities to accomplish important shared goals. Other players also recognize economic and social and health benefits of research. Last year, the University of Calgary had $545 million in externally sponsored research. More than 1/3 of that came from industry and nonprofit organizations. So there is broad relevance and broad benefits to the research we perform. It advances discovery. It generates economic activity. It creates jobs. It supports existing industries, and it helps create tomorrows. Federal funding plays an essential role. It supports talent and the creation of new ideas for the benefit of society. But funding levels are eroding. Since 2020, federal funding has fallen in real terms by 19%. At the same time, our competitors are increasing their funding. The stakes are global. We need to increase research funding to attract and retain talent, create new ideas, and grow enterprises. The top economies in the world are doing just that. We also need to maintain a merit-based allocation of that funding, one based on rigorous independent review. Canada's current system is considered international best practice. And while it is true that U15 institutions, such as the University of Calgary, do receive the largest amount of this funding, we also receive most of industry funding, 75% to be exact. A strong innovation and startup ecosystem has broad spillover benefits when university research is mobilized towards innovation. At the University of Calgary, we have activated several commercialization pathways, including the Hunter Hub for Entrepreneurial Thinking, mentoring programs for innovation training, a set of evergreening, philanthropically driven venture funds, and several sectoral innovation hubs. For the third consecutive year, the University of Calgary is the top startup company creator among Canadian research institutions. Our ecosystem is working to mobilize research. U15 institutions are the anchors of Canadians' research ecosystem, but we are not silos. We routinely collaborate with other institutions. Just last week, the University of Calgary and Alberta partnered with the University of Lethbridge and Northwestern Polytechnic in Grand Prairie to expand rural medical training. We have many joint ventures with Southern Alberta Institute of Technology, a polytechnic in Calgary, with Mount Royal University, and with other post-secondaries across the country. Increased federal funding will help promote those collaborations by supporting scholars, and through these partnerships and collaborations, help smaller institutions grow, just as the University of Calgary has grown. The merit-based funding model based on excellence is key to this success. It is a proven winner, the envy of other countries. The core problem with Canada's research funding model is not how the research funding is allocated, but that the funding is falling in actual terms and diminishing our capacity as a nation to conduct impactful research for the benefit of Canadians. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. McCauley. And now for the final 5 minutes presentation, we'll have Dr. Pexman from Western University, please.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and thank you for inviting us to participate in today's discussion. My name is Penny Pexman, and I am the Vice President Research at Western University. In my remarks today, I will share some insights into exciting work led by Western researchers with federal grant funding and echo calls for further investments to strengthen the talent pipeline and to catalyze Canadian research and innovation. At Western, we provide more than 40,000 students with an exemplary learning experience that engages and challenges them to meet ever higher standards in the classroom and beyond. This experience benefits tremendously from having opportunities to interact with other top minds and also to access unique and leading research facilities. It is one way we develop leaders, thinkers, and entrepreneurs who are able to navigate the complexities of our world and solve some of its biggest challenges. We are proud to be located in London, the geographic center of southwestern Ontario. Our campus is enriched by students, trainees, and faculty from across the region, and by numerous local partnerships with hospitals, industry, not-for-profits, Indigenous communities, and other organizations. As a member of the U15 group of Canada's leading research-intensive universities, Western plays a vital role in advancing knowledge, driving innovation, and developing next-generation discoveries that improve local and global health, economies, culture, and societies. It was in London, for example, that Western professor Dr. Ivan Smith introduced cobalt radiation therapy at our affiliated hospitals, doubling the survival rate for early-stage cervical cancer to 60% and benefiting tens of millions of cancer patients. It was also where Dr. Fred Posmeyer discovered a method of extracting and purifying natural surfactant from a cow's lung to help premature babies breathe, saving millions of lives worldwide. Western is also considered the birthplace of the modern practice of wind engineering. Built in the 1960s, the first of its kind boundary layer wind tunnel laboratory has been used to test many of the world's most significant structures, including the CN Tower, Confederation Bridge, and more recently, the Burj Khalifa, the world's tallest structure. Subsequent government investments have since allowed Western to establish an unparalleled cluster of unique wind research facilities and programs that today are helping develop building codes, supporting the construction industry, understand our environment, and keep buildings and their occupants safe. It takes time and sustained investments to develop research strengths at this scale. While excellence is rooted in our history, Western continues to pursue and to lead partnerships aimed at advancing next-generation discoveries that improve global health, economies, culture, and societies. For example, Western has recently launched a nuclear hub, which leverages our expertise and infrastructure to strengthen partnerships with industry, hospitals, academia, and Indigenous partners. We will co-develop a pan-Canadian strategy that ensures the country remains a leader in nuclear research, innovation, and training, and that it continues to deliver real solutions that address decarbonization and advance life-saving medicine. Many other research efforts include partnerships with small to medium-sized institutions across the country, including one with Capilano and Thompson Rivers universities that provides better training to early childhood educators. Another with Simon Fraser, Dalhousie, and Memorial is preparing primary care providers for future pandemics. Closer to home, we're working with Windsor on initiatives related to composite materials and technologies. And these are just a few examples. As we say at Western, impact takes many forms, from individual scholars creating and promoting knowledge to collaborative teams developing novel technologies and solutions to grand challenges, from researchers influencing policy to artists creating culture and bringing joy to our lives, and from efforts to understand the fundamental questions that drive curiosity to knowledge that supports the development of our business, legal, health, and education systems. This is why I would echo the U15's recommendations to maintain the principle of the independent expert review process for research grant applications based on the established excellence and rigor of the federal granting councils, to invest in the core funding budgets of the federal granting councils and CFI, to increase federal funding for grant scholarships, doctoral and postdoctoral fellowships by 50%, and to double the number of awards, and to implement the governance advancements to the research support system proposed in the Bouchard report. We encourage the federal government to make a major investment in the federal research ecosystem to support research at all Canadian institutions and ultimately benefit communities like ours here in London and across Canada.
That's terrific. Thank you very much. And thank you all for being right on time with your presentations and some great information to start our study. Thank you to Monsieur Blanchet-Jonca for bringing this forward as a motion and for the committee to prepare for today's work. We'll start off with our 6-minute questions from Michelle Rempel-Garner from the Conservative Party.
Thank you, Chair. I'll direct my questions to Dr. Macaulay. So the University of Calgary has become a top 5 research-intensive university. Hearty congratulations. And that is a higher rank than many larger central Canadian universities. And the University of Calgary has done this, even though it doesn't have the geographic proximity that some of these other institutions would have to central Canadian business cores, or even access to lobby federal government folks involved in the research funding community. So I take from that while federal research funding is very important to the University of Calgary, my question is, would you attribute part of your institution's success to management of strategic objectives from a diversified portfolio of funding, that is industrial funding, philanthropy, mixed land use, in order to leverage the impact of federal research funding?
Thank you very much. We challenged the University of Calgary a few years ago as part of our strategy to combine our expertise from across all our different disciplines to tackle some of Canada's and some of Alberta's and some of Calgary's biggest problems that we faced. And we recognize that there's no one funding source that can do that. Working with the community, what we did is mobilized resources, mobilize the investment around excellence in particular areas, while taking care to ensure that we're attracting talent from around the world to help us provide solutions, but then partnering with our communities, which is very, very important.
Ed, you were my former boss, so I still feel awkward cutting you off, but I only have 6 minutes, so I'll try and behave. So can I take kind of a yes from that?
Yes.
That is excellent. Okay. So we're looking for recommendations here. Would you recommend that the federal government encourage research institutions who apply for federal research funding to diversify their portfolios in a similar manner in order to leverage research funding and get outcomes like skilled workers, intellectual property commercialization, et cetera?
So yes, our scholars do that. Our scholars recognize that we need diverse funding sources in order to solve the problems. And producing highly qualified personnel around you is something that's really, really key. And it's part of our review process in grant that are come forward to the federal and as well as other jurisdictions. So the training of highly qualified personnel, really, really important, producing new talent, new ideas.
Okay, so we've started to hear a lot about the concept of focusing on research excellence and merit, as opposed to, let's say, another model that's based just on regional allocation. If we're going to define that, would you characterize outcomes like the training of skilled workers, knowledge translation, and commercialization of intellectual property within Canada as components of what the federal government should be classifying as research excellence or merit when looking at the allocation of research funding?
Yeah, those are some of the key components. I guess the real proof is the demonstration of impactful research and knowledge mobilization. We have big problems to solve, and institutions across Canada pull together to actually do that. So those are some of the components, but there are others in terms of making sure that we're creating those vibrant local or regional ecosystems to ensure that the talent that we produce actually have the ability to grow and promote prosperity.
So in terms of like looking at what would be established as research excellence in terms of a quantitative way of evaluating funding applications, that list of things that you talked about should be given consideration.
Yes, and it's part of our consideration. But the key thing too is, remember, research excellence is actually defined on the global scale. This is not, it defies borders.
Sure, it's a great point.
So it's great ideas that it can improve the world around us, and that world is very, very large. It's not just restricted to Canada.
So one of the things that I'm really proud of being a University of Calgary staff alumni is that the University of Calgary, particularly over the last 20 years, has really leveraged federal funds into more investments back into the institution, more investment back into research. In terms of a recommendation for this committee, would you say that the federal funding models for research should include ability to leverage federal research funds into the attraction of more funds into those research programs?
We have to have a clear sort of level of funding to promote excellence, to promote talent, to promote discovery. We need to be able to generate those ideas. We also then to look at programs in which we can combine resources to tackle some bigger problems. But individual scholarship and the support of individual scholars is key, that then we can mobilize that together to solve some of the bigger problems which require leveraging.
Right. And I guess what I'm getting at here is that there has to be a demonstrable value for money proposition for the Canadian taxpayer when we're doing this. I understand that basic research is important. It might not necessarily result in something right away, but we have to show that there is translation into the Canadian economy. So with that broader set of metrics that we've talked about, should those sorts of things be included in the allocation of research funding as opposed to sort of like non-defined metrics? Do you think that would give more public buy-in to these types of expenditures?
30.
I think that that would help. I think that we already do that, and the Granting Council presidents would probably be able to speak to that better in terms of what we incorporate in all of our applications. But we have to create that new knowledge, and then we have to mobilize it. We need all sorts of vehicles to make that happen along the way. And leveraging, gathering resources from other areas will be an important part of that mobilization. But the mobilization is important for Canada, and we have to tell that story.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. Great round of questions. Now we'll move over to Ariel Carabega from the Liberals for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I just also wanted to welcome our witnesses to this very important study, and personal shout out to Western University from London. Very happy to have you join us and help us, understand a little bit more about research, especially with the lens of Southwestern Ontario, at Western being one of the U15 universities, but the collaboration too that you have within the region as well. So welcome to the committee. I'll just get right to it. As I understand, funding is allocated to universities through a quota allocation. Could you share with the committee a little bit more about how the allocation per university and how you understand it is decided, for example, by student population, amount of published research, et cetera, or any other factor that you may consider to be a criteria that allows you to get that funding?
Ariel, is this for me?
Yes.
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you. No, that's okay. So I would say the funding is not, a quota is probably not quite the right term. So there is competitive peer review funding competition. So all scholars submit applications. There are panels that are put together of researchers who have content matter expertise. Those researchers are from small institutions, medium-sized institutions, large institutions. International scholars are invited to be part of those panels. There are members of industry organizations on those panels. They decide which research looks the most promising and is most deserving of funding, and that's how the decisions are made about the funding flows. So how many students we have at Western doesn't determine how many federal grant funding dollars we get.
And so how does your institution help researchers complete administrative work related to funding application? And to what extent does this is there like red tape impact university capacity to research? And can the federal government, what can the federal government do to like help the process be better for the granting agencies to ease the burden? And maybe Mr. McCauley can also answer the same question as well. So I'll hear from you and then hear from Mr. McCauley as well.
Sure. There is a considerable administrative burden. It is not getting easier to apply for grant funding. Part of that is because we want to do better and better research, and there are more and more elements we need to consider as we do that work. That is largely what the Vice President Research Office does at an institution, is to support researchers in applying for those grants, meeting the expectations of the grant funding programs, ensuring that good applications go out the door. It's, I think, a challenge for every institution to mount that kind of support.
What all of our institutions try to do, both small and large, is to try to give the scholars as much time as possible to create the new ideas and to create the new proposals. And many of us work in the background to try to ensure effective and efficient administration of those grant proposals, and including encouraging peer review within our institution and between institutions, even before the proposal goes to the grant council, because that improves the proposal and improves the probability of success. But there is a significant burden that takes, and universities across the country collaborate in that burden in terms of joint proposals, things like that. Larger institutions help out smaller institutions, given that capacity, because we all want success.
And Mr. McCauley, if I can just extend the same question that I asked earlier around what are your views around the criteria that are used to allocate the funding? What would you say, similar to what Mrs. Paxman said, or are there different divergent views?
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Paxman that, I mean, their quotas are not, I think, the way to look at it. A merit-based program, and the programs are a variety of different programs that individuals and collections of individuals and then collaborative partners can apply for. The key thing there is the piece on excellence, on merit-based approaches to evaluating those proposals, and a clear set of guidelines on submission. I've been very fortunate and live in different jurisdictions and have grants from different organizations around the world, and the support staff at the tri-councils and CFI just do an amazing job at ensuring no bias and things like that in those proposal evaluations. They're just incredible.
If I can go to Dr. Wegner, who's also in person. I'm sorry, I can't see you right now. I can only see the people on Zoom until the camera turns to you, Dr. Wegner. You did talk about Indigenous research, and I'm interested to know, and if any of the institutions that are here can also, feel compelled to answer, they can also answer, around research funding for specific minority groups, whether it's Indigenous communities or Francophones or other groups that are perceived to be in a minority language or minority community to receive research. Can you touch a little bit on that as well, and the challenges that you're facing towards supporting researchers of those minority groups?
30 seconds.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for the question. Let me start by saying that I really want to sort of echo and acknowledge the points put forward by my colleagues, Dr. Pexman and Dr. McCauley, in that it's really a process of funding the system, right, and ensuring that we're able to provide funding across all of the different priorities, including faculty research, student research, and research in Indigenous and other specific priority kind of areas. And thinking about moving forward with respect to merit-based systems and excellence, really considering what are the components that make up that merit-based and excellence systems. And that feeds into your question, I think, around how do we support specific priorities, things like Indigenous research. And as Dr. McCauley has alluded, the Tri-Council has been fantastic about providing specific calls, for example, that support that kind of research and research into specific priorities.
Okay, we're over time, but
I'm sorry.
Thank you for getting those thoughts in, and maybe we can work some more into other questions. Thank you. Now to Mr. Blanchet-Choquin for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and greetings to all the witnesses who are here today to help with this study. My first question is from Ms. Wagner. Your colleague from University of Calgary mentioned earlier in his opening statement that there was not necessarily problems with distribution of funding, but it was rather underfunding that was the problem. We had information that 70% of funding was distributed to the 15 largest universities in Canada. Now, your university is not part of the 15 largest. Is there a real problem on equity of funding for the smaller universities?
Thank you very much for that question. I think this goes back to our conversations, our opening remarks, including those made by Dr. McCauley, and the 5 points that were brought up by Dr. Pexman around increasing the funding into the system. And so right now there's a lot of there's not enough to go around. And so we end up seeing competition between institutions and things that we don't want to see. We want to see collaboration between institutions. We want to see the opportunities that Dr. McCauley was talking about earlier. We want to see teams working together. We want to see interinstitutional faculty membership coming together to solve some of our most pressing problems. And in order to do that, we have to have opportunities for students and faculty researchers to access granting funds at the federal level. And so it's really a process of sort of lifting all boats. It's not about providing to one versus the other. It's about providing to the system so that we can work together to do really excellent work and solve the nation's problems.
Thank you for those details. I would like to hear you on the following. Your university has more students than other large universities in the country, but you're not amongst the 15th universities in terms of research. I would like you to explain this. What do you think of the current structure of research funding in Canada? Do you have more students in university compared to large universities? They have, fewer students.
On this question, I would reflect back on Dr. Pexman's comments about how there is no real quota with respect to Tri-Council funding. So it's not based on the number of students that we have as an institution. It's really based on the applications that are put forward by the researchers within our institutions. And so it really is about providing a supportive system where faculty researchers can put forward the highest quality of applications to the Tri-Council to be funded and do work. And so it's not based, it isn't reflected in the number of students, it's reflected in the quality of the applications and the research support. So as Dr. Pexman indicated, the VPR's office often is research services support. That's our reason for being, is to support faculty to do really excellent applications. And so it's really a reflection of the great faculty work and the support that's able to be provided through the research services that are within the institution that leads to the success of the applications.
Merci, Madame Wagner.
Thank you, Ms. Wagner. I agree entirely with you. No, that institution that merits it should be rewarded. But if you look at the research chairs in Canada, so if you look, the funding is granted on the 3 previous years of funding they received, and it's revisited every 5 years. So if the history has not received historical funding, it's hard to access it. So how, can a smaller university that doesn't have a history of funding that's exemplary, how can it succeed in getting new funding and be competitive compared to the large-size universities? For instance, the U15 member universities that get some 79% of research funding available.
Thank you. That's an excellent question, and that really goes back to my opening remarks. There are opportunities for us to increase the system and also to create specific programs that might advantage smaller institutions where it is a little harder to break in. And so smaller or mid-sized institutions like ours, oftentimes we are looking at recruitment from, say, for example, mid-career researchers or individuals who are coming in from practice, long histories in health, for example, who become health researchers. And so they don't necessarily have those significant funding successes from their previous experiences to build upon. And so thinking about ways that we can bring researchers who are new to the system or have not yet had an experience into the system. We don't want to make the assumption, I think, that just because you haven't had an opportunity to access the system, you don't have a great idea. And so trying to be creative about ways to provide avenues for faculty, researchers, and great minds to enter the system in new ways that we haven't thought of before.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wagner. I want to come back to a situation reported to us with our last study, when people mentioned to...
We are at time, but I know you'll get an opportunity in the next round. Mr. Boulleris, welcome, bienvenue. It's good to have you part of our committee today and subbing for Mr. Cannings. You have 6 minutes, please.
Merci.
Thank you, Chair. It's also a pleasure for me to be here. Mr. Canning had other obligations, and it was a pleasure for me to volunteer because I truly believe in the fundamental importance of research, not just to advance human knowledge, but for economic development, as well as the possibility of public policy based on science and research and evidence. It helps us do our work. Let me begin with Ms. Wagner. I'm going to follow up on my colleague from the bloc. You talked about the equity of the ecosystem, the research ecosystem in Canada, and you would like a democratization. The smaller institution, one that will have never done any research in a given field or on a given issue or topic, be able to have access to research funding, even if it's a first time. It reminds me a little bit about, young people who enter the labor market, and you want them to already have work experience, but they're just entering the labor office, and that they have so much to offer. So how do you envisage the mechanics? Should it be reserved funding for these new initiatives, new fields of research, or is it in more general criteria? You talked about a creative approach instead of systematically refusing. Could you expand, please?
That's an excellent question, and I think there's lots of different opportunities that could be put forward to start to address some of those pieces. Some of the ideas that we've come up with to this point is thinking about how the scoring system works within Tri-Council, and is it most appropriate to put a lot of weight, for example, on previous funding success. And there may be some situations where that is entirely appropriate, and I'm not suggesting that that's not the case. But we do see opportunities, for example, early career researchers, which get at exactly what you've referenced with a new employee trying to enter the workforce, and you need experience to get experience. And it sort of equates to the same sort of approach. could we look at similar kinds of approaches for individuals who perhaps have great ideas and haven't been able to break in yet to that system? And so is there opportunities to create special calls or special opportunities that allow individuals who need experience to get experience to become a participant in the system?
Si vous permettez, Madame.
If you'll allow me, I'd like to continue with you before I turn to other very important witnesses. Your university is known for its research on forest fires. And last summer, we saw, because of the climate change crisis and climate regulations, we saw how in some regions of the country were very much affected by these forest fires, and we fear that next summer will be worse than last summer. Some forest fires have already begun in Quebec, and the accumulation of snow in BC is insufficient, and there could be a very, very dry summer around the corner. Now, I'd like to ask you, federal funding for research on forest fires, is it sufficient? And how could that research help us very concretely in the communities across the country to protect citizens from this new phenomenon, which unfortunately will increase?
Thank you for that question. It's such an important topic right now, both federally and certainly for the interior of BC in particular, that has experienced absolutely devastating impacts of forest fire over the last couple of years. And so I'm really pleased to say that TRU has decided that wildfire is an absolute priority of our institution. We've partnered with the province. We're going to develop a training and education center that will look at everything from basic training through undergraduate and graduate training into research to create an ecosystem of research-informed training. As many of us know, with climate change, the adaptation, training and response needs to change, and we need research to do that. I think back to Dr. McCauley's comments at the beginning. Research drives society, right? We need research in order to really move forward with answering some of the pressing calls of our current situation. And so we have seen definitely some influx of federal funds, in particular around NRCan and the opportunities that exist through Natural Resources Canada. And I think that that's definitely a start. But that there's lots and lots of work to do, and I would expand beyond wildfire that to many other different types of climate disasters that we're experiencing as a country. High priority item and area, and definitely a source for investment at the federal level.
30 seconds if you have a short question and a short answer.
Je pense que je vais laisser.
I think I'll give those seconds back to the committee.
So thank you very much for your questions. Now we'll move over to, for the second round, Gerald Soroka for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for coming today. Since Dr. Wagner, you have come here in person, I think I'll start with you. How is TRU working to diversify its funding beyond federal support and tuition, specifically through commercial partnerships or intellectual property initiatives? And please provide examples.
Thanks for that question. So TRU, as I alluded to in my opening remarks, we're very much a growing research institution. And so at this point, we've been quite successful in tri-council funding and in provincial funding and are really developing on the innovation and the IP front, as well as our industrial partnerships. So as Dr. Pexman alluded to, the VPR's office often is the primary source for research support. That is also the case at TRU. So we're making significant investments into things like industrial individuals who are responsible for specific industrial and commercial IP-related contracts and building those relationships with industry. In addition, thinking forward to building partnerships with some of the larger institutions in our province to create collaborations around some of those pieces. So the smaller and mid-sized institutions, to fully flesh out offices of intellectual property and commercialization, it's a big undertaking. It's a big lift for a small and mid-sized institution. So really looking at interinstitutional collaboration to build out our opportunities in those areas.
Okay, so what criteria do you use to prioritize research projects, And does it also include looking at a return on investment?
Yeah, so at a smaller and mid-sized institution, we identify pillars of research priorities similar to the larger institutions. And as an institution, we will absolutely invest in those research areas. So for us, it's certainly one of our research areas is wildfire. Another one is Indigenous health. And, return on investment was the other part of that question, correct? And so when we think about making investments into research, we're often thinking about the capacity that's built, in particular, around Tri-Council funding. So one of the other members brought up, for example, the Canada Research Chair program. And those kinds of opportunities of having a Canada Research Chair, I think about Dr. Mike Flanagan and Dr. Jill Harvey, who are chairs at TRU. They help us build relationships with industry, right? They help us, they provide almost ambassadorships for the institution to create path roads into return on investment for grant dollars. And that's a really important piece of building research at a university.
On the wildfire science that you guys have been developing there, and I great that you're attracting funding and partnerships with that, but is that only looking at the forests themselves or how a fire burns, or are you also looking at, new technologies and planes or ways of extinguishing the fires as well?
Absolutely. We're looking at a wide variety of areas. So we're actually thinking of it as wildfire studies, thinking about training, education, research, and innovation, thinking about not only wildfire science, but also community and social resilience. How does wildfire impact community? How does community respond to wildfire? Occupational and community health around wildfire, and definitely Indigenous cultural fire as well, and how all of those pieces fit into wildfire mitigation, response, and prevention.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Dr. Pexman, what are your main goals for Western's research and innovation over your term, and how do you plan to balance traditional strengths and new research areas?
Thank you for the question. I think we have big ambitions at Western. I feel like, I'm a relatively new VPR, and I'm struck by the research strengths that already exist and the opportunities that exist to build on those through partnership, through innovation, and tech transfer. One of the examples of a priority, I think, that is one that I mentioned in my comments, and it's the nuclear hub. And I like that example because it's built on discovery research in things like medical isotopes and nuclear energy, but it also involves key partnerships both within the province and beyond, and with different types of organizations. And it capitalizes on a couple of federal programs that actually require matching and contributions and leveraging. So one would be the NSERC Alliance program. So we have a number of successful NSERC Alliance grants that have just come in through the nuclear hub, where there's an industry partner who wants to engage with one of our researchers. The federal funding requires there's a combination of federal and external funding, and those tend to build into bigger and bigger industry contracts. The MyTax program would be another, where there's a requirement for, in order for a student to engage with an industry partner, there's some money from MyTax, there's also money from the industry partner, and those lead to fantastic job opportunities and larger scale industry partnerships. And so we've got a number of those examples right now in the nuclear hub.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you for the questions and great answers. Over to Lena Metledge-Diab, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you to our witnesses for coming. I heard something this morning that I really wasn't expecting to hear, but it really caught my attention. And Dr. Wagner, let me ask you, you talked about the Institute for Wildfire and understanding and managing the effect of wildfire. I think it's so important. I actually have one of my children who did graduate work in wildfire, and when she started a number of years ago, she was told this in Nova Scotia, in Dalhousie University. At the time, there were no other ones that had done that before. This was a number of years ago, and just I guess to come back full circle, in 2 weeks' time, I'm actually putting on a session in my community. I come from Halifax, Western Nova Scotia, all the way on the other coast, where we experienced terrible wildfires in my constituency last year that had left hundreds of people devastated, many homes burned, many were evacuated. A number of things happened. luckily there were no people fatalities. But I'm actually putting on an information session on emergency preparedness on April 25th. Perhaps we should afterwards talk to you and see what information we can get from you. But going back to that, how do you collaborate, or how do you teach, like you said, I think it's to solve problems, and some of it is not just your provincial problem or your own territory or even Canada. It could be national but international issues such as that. How do you collaborate, or how can you to get more researchers, perhaps get more funding, get more people knowledgeable in that, so that you can actually garner much more? And I'm happy to hear that you've received funding from Natural Resources Canada, but perhaps you can describe to us the process of that and what can we do as parliamentarians to aid you in that.
Thank you very much for that question, and I echo the devastation of the wildfires. As you know, there was a number of lives lost as well last year in the firefighter ranks, and for us, we were working directly with BC Wildfire Service at the time and felt very deeply the loss of their members that happened last summer, and so it's become very much an emotional topic for us as well at our institution. So thank you for that. Our development of the Institute of Wildfire Science, Adaptation and Resiliency, our scientific director is Dr. Mike Flanagan, and he is he's globally known for his expertise in wildfire research and incredibly well connected with other researchers, both provincially, nationally, and globally. And so having him and the other researchers do that work and connect with other researchers and then supporting them to do that. Our role is really to provide the assistance, the support to have the researchers do the fantastic work that they do, and inviting other institutions and other researchers to become part of the Institute. Another big piece for us is the creation of the Wildfire Training and Education Center, which we think, in terms of the ecosystem, is really a first. We are not aware of any other systems where training, education, research, and innovation are coming together under one roof to do these things collectively with all of the people engaged. And the idea of that is really research-informed training and education, so building that research and then informing the things that are actually happening on the ground. We're not interested in doing that only regionally. We really would like to see both the Institute and the Centre become a provincial source and absolutely a national source. So actively seeking any kind of collaboration that anybody would like to have with us, and trying our very best to work with other post-secondaries across our province and across our nation.
With the limited time I have left, Dr. McCauley, question for you. The U15, your university, and others, I know they do tremendous work, and you talked a lot about team building, collaboration across industry, but also with other universities and so on. Perhaps in your setting, and you were giving an example, how can you more, I guess, and I'm sure, I think you do, I think they all do. I have a U15 in my province, Dalhousie, and I know they collaborate with other centres. But what else can you, I guess, recommend to us in terms of how we can help you as parliamentarians and as a government, so that all sectors in the university, regardless of their size, work together better?
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to pause on that question, and maybe if there's an answer we could have in writing. We are at time. We have 5 minutes left in this section of the meeting. We have two 2.5-minute rounds, so we'll go to the first of the 2.5 minutes. Over to Monsieur Blanchet-Chocat, please.
Thank you, Chair. I will continue my questions. For Ms. Paxman, I'd like to hear you further on the fact that the size of the institution should not influence research funding. If I've understood, we should fund universities based on past innovation, but I see it as the purpose of research being to fund research, but not to reward discovery as the current model is with the structure. So I would like to hear further from you. Is the current system adapted for innovation? Should there not be improvements to enable everyone, regardless of the university, where they be able to make major innovations.
Thank you. I think the best outcomes will be derived in a system where each application is adjudicated on its merits. And so we consider what is the research question, how well is it being interrogated, and do we feel this is a great training opportunity? Those tend to be the questions that we ask under the current federal funding programs, and I think they are the right questions. So that's my opinion about how we should be evaluating the decisions, making the decisions about federal funding opportunities.
Merci des précisions.
Thank you for those explanations. So I'm hearing excellence, but for some peers who are on panels, does the source of the request matter? For example, do the U15s have an advantage? This may be a bit taboo, but I'd like to hear you on it.
30 seconds, please.
The evaluation is about the researcher's capability to do the work. That is typically the criterion. And whether the institution at which someone is employed is not a big driver of that, right? So as we've heard, there are excellent researchers working on, for instance, wildfire science at Thompson Rivers. And so that expertise should be valued, and it is, regardless of the institution the person comes from.
Beautiful. Thank you. Monsieur Boulerice for 2.5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. Earlier, we heard that the fact that the amount of funding in general from the federal government is insufficient, and it's giving rise to a climate of competition between institutions rather than collaboration between institutions. And Ms. Wagner referred to this. This is worrisome in my eyes. So I just wonder, could Ms. Paxman, Mr. Macaulay, Ms. Wagner, do you agree? Do you think there is a kind of a competitive war between everyone trying to get the biggest piece of the pie?
Madame Paxman.
I think when resources are scarce, people will make difficult choices about where funds should be allocated. And I absolutely believe that Canada's competitive advantage is eroded when we don't have sufficient funding in the research funding programs.
As I mentioned earlier, I mean, knowledge mobilization, knowledge creation is a global game. And yes, the world is very, very competitive. And in order for Canada to succeed, we have to identify areas where we want to do research that is impactful to solve problems that Canadians believe are very, very important for society. And the example of forest fires is a great, current day example. But excellence has to be paramount, and we have to be able to provide the mechanisms to support the path for our scholars, from undergraduate students, graduate students, postdocs, and faculty members, to really produce the best research possible, given the funds that we have.
Madame Wagner, le mot de la fin.
Ms. Wagner, you have the last word.
Thank you. I would concur with both of my colleagues and suggest that, resourcing the whole system so that it's adequately able to support the kinds of excellence and research that needs to be done across all of the different groups and regions that are doing the research would be the absolutely best case scenario for all of the participants.
Great, thank you. Thank you all, and thank you especially to our witnesses, Dr. Shannon Wagner, Dr. Ed Macaulay, and Dr. Penny Paxman for your testimonies and your excellent questions and participation as we get started on this study on the distribution of federal government funding among Canada's post-secondary institutions. If there's any further information you'd like to provide us, please feel very welcome to do that through our clerk. Members on Zoom, if you could just stand by, we're going to just suspend for a minute or two while we get our next panel up, coming from a couple of the colleges in Canada. So we'll just suspend for a couple of minutes.
Thank you.
witnesses that have just joined us. Pursuant to Standing Order 10831 and the motions adopted by the committee on Tuesday, January 30th and Thursday, February 15th, 2024, the committee resumes its study of the distribution of federal government funding among Canada's post-secondary institutions. It's now my pleasure to welcome in person, we have Dr. Mark Nantel from Niagara College, Vice President, Research, Innovation, and Strategic Enterprises. And also we have from Aurora College via video, Pippa Secom-Het, Vice President, Research. For Ms. Secom-Het, you can choose the language of your choice on the bottom of your screen, and I see you nodding, so you're well aware of that. You'll each have 5 minutes to start, and starting with Dr. Nantel from Niagara College.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to thank the committee for undertaking the study and for inviting me as a witness. As was said, my name is Marc Nantel, and I'm the Vice President of Research, Innovation, and Strategic Enterprises at Niagara College. I have experience in research at both the university and college levels. I have a PhD in plasma physics, done research in France and the US, and was an adjunct professor of physics at the University of Toronto for 10 years. I've been at the Niagara College since 2011, leading its research and innovation division. You will no doubt hear much about university research and the distribution of funding between smaller and larger universities for this study. I'm here to discuss the place of colleges within that ecosystem. Interestingly, 11 colleges get more overall research funding than the university listed at number 50 on the Canadian University Research List. So several colleges do more funded research than some universities. College research is often about the application of knowledge to solve immediate problems. It's about the companies that approach us for help. It's about developing new products, processes, and services with them. And it's about giving college students a richer education. At Niagara College, we've been doing applied research with industry for more than 25 years. We're currently #1 on that top 50 research college list. We focus our applied research on sectors of importance to the Niagara region: advanced manufacturing, agriculture and the environment, food and beverages, and business and commercialization. Typically, we require that there be a one-to-one matching of government investment into the project so that the company has skin in the game and the desire to commercialize the result, leading to faster economic development and job creation. Here's only one example. I can give more during the question period. Hamel Machine is a Niagara Falls small-medium enterprise that used to cater to the automotive part industry. Niagara College helped Hamel develop a completely new product line that automates the harvesting of microgreens and speeds it up 50 times. Their 3 harvester machines for cutting, washing, and drying are now sold domestically and internationally under a new spin-out company, Hamel Agricultural Processing Solutions, which has grown over the past 5 years from 0 to 20 full-time employees. Last year, they did $3 million in sales and completed their first overseas installation in Abu Dhabi. So that's great, but Canadian colleges achieve outcomes like this for the country on less than a shoestring. I like to say that we do it on the plastic bit at the end of the shoestring. So right now, colleges receive only 2.9% of the federal funding for research. Here's an example of how colleges lead and could do more with better funding. Niagara College is the creator and leader of the Southern Ontario Network for Advanced Manufacturing Innovation, SONAMI. You've heard about it from Madame Johnston earlier, which brings together 9 colleges and 2 universities. We like collaborating. And in its 8 years of existence so far, SONAMI has undertaken more than 460 projects with 316 industry partners who commercialize 149 products. That's 32% commercialization rate, and created more than 280 jobs. Those are undercounts because of reporting. These projects were mostly funded through FedDev Ontario and also through NSERC. This is an example of how colleges can lead strong networks that include universities, but currently several federal funding programs supporting similar networks do not allow colleges as lead applicants. This needs to change, including the measurements of success of such programs that should reflect what colleges can bring to the table. If the evaluation criteria are about refereed papers instead of number of jobs created, then college applications won't rank very well. That would both be disappointing and counterproductive if what you want is economic development through manufacturing transformation, transition to a greener economy, industry investment in technologies, and increased productivity. Here's another example of what colleges could do with more than 2.9% of the federal research funding. We don't keep the intellectual property generated through these collaborative projects generally. We give it to the industry partner. Companies come for us for solutions, but they don't always know what to do and how to take the best benefit for the IP. Colleges could help them understand what they have and help them commercialize it. Right now, though, colleges and their offices of research are underfunded and do not have the bandwidth or resources to take their industry partners on this complex journey. So in conclusion, Mr. Chair, I'm happy that colleges are included in this study. I hope that I have demonstrated the important role that they can play in Canada's research ecosystem, especially as it touches industry relevance, economic development, and job creation. We can do so much more if we can be recognized as such and enabled to realize our full potential for Canada's economy of the future. Thank you very much.
Terrific, thank you. It's great to hear Tsunami getting a couple of shout-outs. Keithio Mwanzia is the network manager there, and he replaced me as president of the Chamber of Commerce in Guelph when I was elected. And so we're all connected in some way or another. Back over to our next witness, to Pippa Secom-Het from Aurora College, please. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to speak with the committee today. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm here speaking on behalf of the president of Aurora College, Dr. Glenda Vardy-Dell. She was unable to make it today and asked me to speak on her behalf since we recognize it is critical that the voices of smaller and remote post-secondary institutions are able to participate in the discussion surrounding the distribution of research funding. I want to share some information about our college to provide context for our institution and our position with regard to the distribution of funds. Aurora College is the public community college of the Northwest Territories. It has 3 main campuses in Inuvik, Fort Smith, and Yellowknife, and research staff located at each of these campuses. We also operate the Western Arctic Research Centre in Inuvik, which is a logistics hub for research in Canada's Western Arctic and serves the college, the community, as well as hundreds of external researchers every year from regional, national, and international origins. And the North has always generated a tremendous amount of research interest. And still, the science and the research historically have been led by researchers located outside of the region. And these researchers are located primarily and federal government departments and universities across southern Canada. Increasingly, we have to note we're seeing large international teams working in our area as well. And all this research has made a tremendous contribution to science. It's valuable nationally, regionally, internationally, but there's always been a gap between the big picture science and the regional research concerns and priorities. And so when I first began working in the territories 25 years ago, we spent much time advocating for the priorities of northern jurisdictions and highlighting these to federal research funders to encourage work on these topics, since the funds were inaccessible to residents in the territory. And this prevented the region from maintaining research capacity in the north, conducting research on local priorities, or directing the use of any research funds, which created a great sense of inequity. So Aurora College has started conducting a small amount of research. It started in 1995 when the college was created and merged with the Science Institute of the Northwest Territories in advance of the separation and the creation of Nunavut. So this positioned a small amount of capacity in Aurora College to focus on regional applied research programs, and it's since grown. Aurora College became eligible to access tri-agency funding in 2014, and over the last decade has really started to grow and realize the aspirations of developing applied community-partnered research. Over this decade, we've grown from 10 to 45 research staff, developed applied research programs with community partners, always partnered, and creating strong benefits for northern communities. It's also important to highlight that we've been able to anchor access to indirect cost funding for our regional Indigenous governments and not-for-profit organizations, so contribute to creating a regional applied research ecosystem. Through this last decade, we've also increased our collaborative engagements with research from universities that have active northern research programs. This allows us access to new funds, mentorships, and partnerships, but it's also helped us understand how much more indirect cost funding is provided to universities through the Research Support Fund. So now Aurora College is currently in the process of transforming from a college to a polytechnic university. And part of this vision is really about building and expanding on this applied research focus. And access to national research funds has been a game changer for us. It has positioned the college in a meaningful role for the region, opened avenues for funds, equipment, and expertise to focus and partner with northern and community organizations to address local challenges. And the NSERT College and Community Innovation Program has been critical to our growth and success in developing research programs that bring impact and benefits to the communities we serve. So given our position and our recent experiences with national research funding, we'd like to highlight and recommend continued and increased funding in the College and Community Innovation Program. This anchors applied community partnered research where we've demonstrated success and are really, and impact as well, and really positioned to grow. We'd also highlight the access to the research support funds to help offset indirect costs, and providing colleges and institutes with equal access to these would create significant capacity in our institutions to meet the evolving research requirements with data security, research data management, and the many changing requirements. But we also suggest potentially targeting funds that build bridges between universities and colleges to increase the impact from research and knowledge at the community level. And of course, being Northerners, we want to highlight that there is a Northern supplement for university programs that is not available for the Northern colleges or polytechnics. And this creates an additional barrier for our ability to conduct research. So I would like to close by reiterating the importance of national research funding for supporting applied Northern research within colleges. It's critical that opportunities remain for remote Northern and Indigenous people to access national research funds and participate in the applied Northern research ecosystem. So I'd like to say thank you for allowing me to speak with you today, and I welcome all questions to help provide the small institutional perspective in support of the work of this committee.
Terrific. Thank you very much for your testimony. And now we'll go to our first six-minute questioner, Corey Tucker from the Conservatives, please.
Thank you so much, and thank you for our witnesses. I'm going to start in the south here with Niagara. Are smaller colleges receiving sufficient funds to support the federal government in terms of managing the compliance with the new federal policies on sensitive research partnerships with identities such as PRC or international actors? Do you have the funds available to be compliant?
No.
No.
I'll go back to my colleague Pippa at Aurora. One thing that colleges are missing is resources to do the stuff that research needs to get done on top of research.
Yeah.
Project management, data gathering. We've got research data management. We've got data security. We've got the international security aspects to look after, lots of reporting. And that is not generally supported very strongly in the college grants. Universities have
anyone from your organization that has turned down new research projects because they are associated with the PRC or foreign actors that are on that list?
No, we listen. Most of our research, and I don't want to speak for every college in Canada, but most of our research is with local small medium enterprises, and very few of them are multinationals with ties in several countries, including those that are of concern.
I just got a clarification. You talk about the different percentages, but on average, 48% of the funding received for supported university research comes from the federal government. How much of the federal funding does your college receive for research as a percentage?
I'd say it's the majority of cash funding that we get is from the federal government. Some colleges lean more provincially, but to be fair, there's not generally much in the province of Ontario anyway towards research funding for colleges. The program named by Pippa, the NSERC CCI program, is a big source. We also are blessed to be funded by a regional development agency, FedDev Ontario, which is federal, but regionally federal, if you want. So I'd say it's in the 90% of what we do, but that's still a small number, and that's part of the problem.
Absolutely. Now, switching to the north, to Aurora, thank you so much for zooming in today. Same question. Do you have the funds required to protect the research and our country and implement the policies that are that have been rolled out by the federal government?
Honestly, it's a stretch. We don't receive very much funding to support that work, and it's off the sides of people's desks that we manage to do it because we have to. And so we just find the ways to pull together as needed within our institution to do it. But do we have the base funding to meet it easily? No.
And the research that you're doing is specific, or especially the research that is done specific for the lives of people in the north. Have you had any international groups or companies that want to do research in the north that you had questions about?
There's lots of people from many countries that conduct research in our region. Questions, I'm not sure what you mean questions. We do have a regional licensing process that manages and adheres or forces adherence on, basic research requirements that would be expected of a Canadian, within Canadian research compliance
Have you turned down
structures.
any funds from foreign actors that because of this policy?
No.
No. Okay, and just because we got you for the second round of questions, so I have some additional ones once I'm done with these. But can you tell me a little bit more about Aurora's life in the north, such as how do you guys heat your buildings up there? What sort of energy source?
It depends on the community. So it's natural gas in some communities, it's oil in others. There is some hydro, but largely it's gas and oil.
Could you describe the effects of climate change on your life in the north and the facilities?
Climate change is impacting everything in the north. The region where our research center is located, the Western Arctic Research Center, and the Tuktoyaktuk coastline is, I think that climate change is 3 to 4 times what you're seeing in southern Canada, and all of our infrastructure is on permafrost. And so the melting permafrost and the accelerated changes in temperatures are having very significant impacts. It impacts every infrastructure project, every building, coastal erosion. It is a consideration for everything we do.
Thank you. And just switching to the south, same question. How have the effects of climate change affected day-to-day operations on your campus, if it has?
Well, we always try to, whenever we have a building or renovate a building, to choose technologies that are
not the mitigation of the effects of climate change, but actual climate change.
Actually, climate change. Well, I'm in a wine-producing region, and it affects the type of grapes we can grow. In some cases, it affects the types of pests that come our way, which then affects the types of grapes we can grow. Some pests used to die in the winter, and then you're okay the next spring. And that doesn't happen quite as much anymore. So we get to see some of those effects for sure.
Okay, thank you. And now for 6 minutes to Valerie Bradford, please.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to both of the witnesses today. I was glad to hear you refer to tsunami. I actually have Conestoga College, like just a block away from my constituent office, so I'm very familiar. And I grew up in Niagara, so very familiar with Niagara. And I know all the things you do. So been at the culinary school and seen the grapes, and you've got all the various kinds of liquor covered, just so everyone knows. So it's a great place. So I'm interested to know, and I'm also very, very aware of the research that you've done with manufacturing. I was the chair of the Manufacturing Innovation Network, and I'm quite aware of all the excellent collaborative applied research that goes on with manufacturers. And just to clarify that the purpose of this study is not to redistribute the current funding and take away from one group of post-secondary to apply to another. I just was wondering, in your opinion, do you think it would be better to create specific programs to support college-level research or to adapt the existing fund programs? And if so, how could the existing programs be improved or adapted?
Thank you for the question. I think it depends on the outcomes you want at the end. If the outcomes you want is Canada to generate new knowledge and keep us at the top of the pointy bits of science, then definitely universities are where you go. I sometimes say that colleges will not discover the Higgs boson. That's been done already. Or detect gravitational waves. That's been done already. I have to change my analogies. But if what you want is economic development, jobs, small companies getting bigger in regions, then this is the type of impact we can have. So from a point of view of, is it better to have college programs or have college and universities applying for the same programs? I think that you should evaluate if a proposal is good based on the outcomes that you want out of the research. And so if what you want is something that universities are excellent at bringing, then I think it's a university program. If it's something that colleges are excellent at bringing, then make it a college program. There could be some that have both that apply, but then at that point, the evaluation criteria and the outcomes that you want and expect from it should be adapted such that colleges won't be evaluated on the number of papers they write in Nature or Science, because this is not what we do. This is not our output. Our outputs are prototypes. They're new products that get commercialized so that our companies do better.
Right, and could you expand on that? I believe in your opening comments, you explained how beneficial the applied research done by colleges is to companies, and they own the IP at the end of the day and everything like that, even though they may not really have the expertise to commercialize it without assistance. Could you now address the role that the research plays in your student training, and what skills do they acquire when they take part in applied research projects? So looking at the students' side of it.
Sure, absolutely, and thank you. The shortness of the statement had me choose what I meant to discuss, but I'm glad you asked it as a question. Students are in every project we do. We're a college. We're there to educate students and prepare them for the life of success that they hope to have. So every project we do has students. In some cases, it's done in their classroom as part of a capstone project, and they get a grade for it and all that. But some of them, we hire the students as their part-time job or as their co-op term to work full-time on projects during that period. And they work very closely with the industry partners. They're part of the meetings with them. They're part of the designing of the solution, trying. So they learn a whole bunch of essential skills like, well, dealing with adults and keeping time, keeping their management. They understand budgets. They understand what outcomes are and why they have to keep to those outcomes, and how to present and how to write in a way that is business related, not so much school related. And so the students who work with us in projects learn a whole lot on the innovation side, but also on the essential skills side. And they make, I'd like to think, readier to hit the job market once they graduate, and more innovative employees who can help companies innovate from inside, right? So, we typically at Niagara College see between 1,500 and 2,000 students do applied research through our innovation centers and our capstone projects. And we're a 12,000 student college. So it's a good proportion of our students who participate. And many more could if we could undertake more projects, obviously.
Do you have co-op programs at Niagara College?
Yes, absolutely.
So they go out and get the work experience.
They go either in companies outside or community partners to do their co-op terms, or they can work in the research department, for example. A lot of them do that.
Turning now to Ms. Succumb-Het, you mentioned in your opening statement that you would like to see targeting funds to build bridges between the colleges and universities. Can you give us examples of how we could do that? Could you describe what that would look like?
We only have 10 seconds, so if you could briefly answer, and maybe we could get some in writing.
Yes, I can certainly follow up, but there's a good example in ArcticNet research partnerships between, it was led through University of Laval, partnerships with universities, colleges, and northern residents. And it's a great example.
Thank you very much. Monsieur Blanchet-Jolcan for 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chair. And I welcome and thank our witnesses. A question for Mr. Nantel. We've noted that Niagara College is ranked first on the Research Info Source website. In other words, your institutions has a bigger research capacity than some universities. Now, the fact that you're not necessarily a university penalizes you, despite your effectiveness. I'm curious, how could we change or improve the current funding structure to help you more? Thanks for the question. One aspect that would help us is to have access to more programs that will enable us to be at the head of big networks or large projects. In general, the programs available to us, and I believe, the kind of research granting agencies to do with agricultural food, the colleges could add themselves as their little brother or little sister to a university application, but we could not do that alone. So we have been exemplary. We have succeeded in commercializing lots of research. I mean, colleges could eat at the same table as the big brothers and sisters. When you assess the kind of projects colleges are accustomed to doing or would like to do, you have to look at the spin-offs. The spin-offs at the college level are not necessarily the same as the spin-offs at the university level. So that needs to be taken into account. And it has to tie into what the government wants to accomplish. My colleague from Aurora has mentioned that right now we're not particularly well supported for other aspects, and all of the things that you have to add on to project data management, security aspects, diversity, inclusion. We would like to do all that, and we do it, in office, but universities have specialized programs for that, and colleges do not. So you want to be able to have funding focused on the research project, but also the management of the projects. Thank you very much, Mr. Nantel, and I congratulate you for the network, your project on manufacturing for innovation. We can see with that example that colleges do have the capacity to do good research. Now, for the structure established in Canada for research funding, do you think that applied research, which is done more in colleges, is underestimated under the structure or undervalued? Might that be why the funding structure does not allow colleges to do as much as universities? Thanks for the question. I sometimes, realize, universities been around for thousands and colleges not so long. So colleges, decades, some 20, 50 years, depending on the college. In Quebec, you have CEGEPs. You may be a little bit farther ahead than the rest of Canada, but colleges in the rest of Canada are more recent, so they have not penetrated, the population's, ways of doing things and the decision-making process. So maybe we do, as colleges, need to be showing what we are capable of doing in a better way. But the thing is, you have colleges, universities, you've got industry. The thing is, it's the outcomes that are important. And so we need to find a good balance, the kind of right curve we need for the kind of funding. We need to get the right curve in terms of outcomes. I think colleges can do more. They have more bandwidth, more capacity to deliver, but they are limited by their limited financial resources. We're basically there to teach, and research is a benefit for society. At university, research is embedded in the raison d'etre of a university. It's recognized. Colleges could do a lot, but we would need more help. Thank you, Mr. Nantel. So to conclude, how do you think the federal government could do more and better to value and validate college-level research? Well, studies like the ones we've done is a good start. It's something that you're able to see tangibly. And it can be with my colleges from Aurora College, you have the perspective of the college in the far north, and ours in the south. That's a first step. Come and see us. Come and visit us. Most MPs who come to visit a college and they leave and they're just wowed. They didn't realize everything colleges did. I'm sure some of your colleagues around this table would agree. Come visit us and you'll see what we do.
Several times. My youngest daughter has 2 diplomas from Niagara, so I think we have shares in Niagara College as well at some point. Mr. Boulderis, for 6 minutes, please.
Merci beaucoup.
Thanks very much, Chair. Thanks to our witnesses, and thanks for that invitation. I'm interested. If I find the time, I'll go visit. I have a question, Ms. Secombe Het from Aurora College. The mandate of Aurora College is rather interested to improve, lives of people in the community through, technology, but also through Indigenous knowledge. Now, tell us about any research projects underway that come under that mission.
Thank you for the question. That come under our mission, some research examples that I can give to you. One would be a partnership that we hold with our territorial government and our regional partners monitoring permafrost along the Tuckanuvik Highway. So really spending a lot of time investing looking at the slope stability, the road stability, the snow loads, to maintain that infrastructure. How do we best maintain that road? And so having a college university regional partnership to conduct that work. Another one would be using UAVs. So to monitor slope stability above cultural sites that are important to Indigenous communities in the region. Another example could be using LIDARs to measure wind speeds to look at putting alternative energy or wind energy systems in as remote systems to diminish our carbon footprint. Those are some examples of some of the research programs we're actively engaged in. Other ones looking at contaminants in water around mines and looking at whether the water sources around some of our communities are safe, or looking at the legacy impacts of mining, arsenic from mining. Those are some examples of the work that we're doing, if that's helpful.
Thank you for that. Earlier, there was mention of climate change and the bigger impact it's going to have in the northern communities. You have a research center on, the Arctic reality. What research is done by that center on the Arctic reality? I mean, that territory is vast. It's going to become more and more accessible, unfortunately. And how do those in the Northwest Territories benefit from the research in the Arctic?
Thank you for the question. Our research center in Inuvik is busy. It is the hub of research activity in the Western Arctic, and you see people from our college conducting research on permafrost, water, infrastructure, energy systems, all of those types of things, but researchers from around the world looking at tree line migration, climate change impacts on fish, on animals, on terrain. There's a broad range of research going on, and largely in partnership with some of our Indigenous communities as well. But I would say that the return of information could be improved. There's a lot of research that's conducted, and it takes a long time to make it back to the people, and that's created tension. And I think that speaks to the inequity that I mentioned earlier on, and all the funding is controlled by people outside of the region, and there's no money or no research able to be done to sort out your own challenges where you could really benefit from research. And so there has been historic inequity across the North. It's well documented, and it remains attention today, although our researchers are improving that, and having people on the ground working with community changes that conversation slowly.
Okay, merci.
Thank you very much. So interesting to hear about those historical inequities as well. A last question, and I'm not forgetting you, Mr. Nantel. So the territories of in the Northwest established 5 research providers: cultural preservation, environmental science, well-being science, management of natural resources, and sustainable communities. In your opinion, when it comes to the funding of research, what is the role of the federal government to attain those 5 research objectives? Is a good job being done? Is it effective? Is there sufficient funding or not?
There's a lot of Northern research questions, and funding is constantly a challenge, but maintaining capacity is equally a challenge. So as we grow and develop the capacity, having access to more funds to conduct applied work will improve our ability to answer those questions. But there's lots of unanswered questions where funding could help address it, but it's also the capacity to address it as well. Funding increased partnerships and that ability to connect community to post-secondary institution is very important.
Move on to the second round, where we'll have the first questioner, Corey Tucker from the Conservatives, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you so much for, again, that testimony. It reinforces the importance of colleges and their communities. I applaud you, what you're doing with your local economies, both in the North and the South. Starting with Niagara, talking about funding, though, and every year, does the federal government increase the funding amounts based on inflation at all?
Not really, no. It wasn't based on inflation.
If you go back 10 years, what is funding roughly like? I'm mindful of time here.
It was less, but it's not as if it was calculated on inflation, obviously. I can't, off the top of my head, tell you 10 years ago. Recently, in the past few budgets, we've seen some injection. Post-COVID, there was an injection at the CCI program at NSERC that was much...
And it kept up with inflation, or...?
It wasn't an inflation thing. It was more like an injection for post-COVID, let's get out of this.
Did it keep up with inflation, or not?
I wouldn't know how to calculate the compound interest of of inflation over the past 10 years. I can get back to you on this, certainly.
Please do. And switching to the north, to the Aurora folks up there, your funding has very similar. It's up a little bit, but is it covering all your costs right now of increased costs associated with inflation?
No, we can do less with the funding than our counterparts in the South. Certainly, the costs of living, the costs of everything in the North are double, and so
absolutely. And just quickly on, just to spell it for some of the people down here that haven't been to the North, what is a jug of milk, either a liter or a gallon or 4-liter milk? What is the rough cost up there?
Goodness. It really depends on the community. You know, the communities closer to the border, it's cheaper. Up in the coastal communities, it could be $20, $25. I mean, there are programs to help offset that. But
Did I hear that right?
Average,
$25? $25 for 4 liters of milk.
When you look further north,
yeah.
But I'm thinking probably around 10. There are subsidies to support that and offset it, but
it doesn't cover.
It's a constant challenge.
I have heard the northern subsidy doesn't cover that, and one of the reasons why is that milk gets taxed by the increase of the carbon tax. So we have the farmers that have to heat those barns and keep those animals safe, and they pay an increased carbon tax on that. Now they're quadrupling that tax. The cost to transport that milk up to the north also pays diesel, most of it's diesel, to get up to the north, which pays the increased carbon tax, which makes life that much more unaffordable. Meanwhile, I think your facility unfairly feels the brunt of the climate change. So we have a policy that does not lower emissions, does not help our fight against climate change, and cost you additional dollars so that your students and the research, it seems, in the north, less gets done than in the south. Would that be a fair comment?
Costs are higher in the north, and there are a number of programs to offset research costs that are more available to universities than to colleges. There is a northern supplement that is not available to us within the college system that NSERC gives. There are other
But that would
programs
be
that offset.
What about the facility? So you talked about earlier questions about you used oil and some diesel and for electricity up there, limited amount of natural gas. And here's another place where the Liberal policies have hurt your ability to do the research in the north at your college, where if we had a natural gas pipeline, you would probably use more natural gas than oil. But because of the Liberal C-69, which is the No Pipelines Act, new pipelines got produced to get clean natural gas up to your facilities. So would you say that that has negatively impacted your ability to lower emissions because you're still using oil?
The emissions are higher with oil, certainly. Nuvik is a slightly more complicated scenario where we were on gas. The gas ran out, now we're back on oil.
So if the new Conservative government removes C-69 and we can get new pipelines built in Canada again, a natural gas pipeline to your community would lower your emissions. And there's other technologies like solar and whatnot to lower emissions, more so than having milk cost $25 a jug. Would that be fair?
Some of our communities sit on large natural gas reserves that could be developed. I'm not. I don't feel comfortable commenting on the pipeline impact just because many of our communities are so remote.
Okay, we're at time now, so thank you for answering the best you can on some of those questions, and we'll go over to Ariel Carabega for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. I would also like to, again, welcome our second round of witnesses. I think one of the questions I had was if you can share how much funding you receive from the federal government compared to other provinces.
Thank you for the question. How much research funding?
Yes.
I cannot give you that number at the moment. I would have to follow up and provide it after.
Maybe if you can talk about like what areas of the funding would be more beneficial then for your institution.
Funding for our institution for research, certainly helping contribute to increased research administration services to help us pursue the funding through the competitive processes, whether they're through the one we focus on largely is the NSERC College and Community Innovation Program, but helping us have the core services that enable us to properly support our researchers to pursue funds to support their areas of expertise and collaborations with communities and industry. That would be key.
And so I know that you conduct research projects in several areas, and I think anyone actually on the panel can answer this question, which include areas like health, energy, environment, food, and agriculture. Earlier, there was one of the witnesses also talked about Indigenous funding, and I did ask a question around minority funding, whether it's for Indigenous communities, Francophones who would be minority in language. What's your approach on securing funding for minority groups that are within your institutions? And are there any, actually? Curious to know if you even have any.
At Aurora College, the population that we serve is a majority Indigenous population in the Northwest Territories, and then composed of diversity of Canadians. And so we do work with our Indigenous partners to secure funds for research programs that align with their interests. And I believe the tri-agencies have had some targeted streams specific to Indigenous communities, and that is identified in the strengthening Indigenous research capacity and the strategy that they're working on with an Indigenous advisory committee.
Any linguistic funding for communities that may be minorities based off of language? like francophones, for example?
The Northwest Territories has 11 official languages, French, English, and then 9 Indigenous languages. And the funding for Indigenous languages is a critical and important issue within our territory. And certainly the leads on that are the Indigenous organizations themselves.
And so what are the challenges that you're facing in terms of securing funding for those specific language researchers?
We currently are not conducting any language research. That work is led by the Indigenous governments and organizations. I believe
would it be beneficial if there was research for language and people who are in I want to say this in French because I don't know how to say this in English. Les minorités linguistiques.
Linguistic minority.
Minority groups.
Certainly, I believe there is a need and demand for that coming from the Indigenous communities and governments.
Mr. Nantal, would you like to comment?
Indeed, I mean, one of our main funders is the FedDev Ontario, Regional Development Agency, and they are very strong in making sure that some of the projects we choose to conduct are about a clean transition, but also as diverse as possible in the people who started or running companies. We certainly keep stats as we talk with industry potential partners, leads that come in and projects that we do. Of the diversity, is the company women-owned? Is the company from a underrepresented minority? At Tsunami, we have signed MOUs with the Black Canadian Chamber of Commerce, the 2S LGBTQIA+ Chamber of Commerce, and with the Indigenous Chamber of Commerce to make sure that our services are known to the businesses who assemble under these chambers of commerce so that we can help them better. So we're trying to go as far as we can to bring them into our area of service.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you very much for that comprehensive answer. Monsieur Blanchet-Choquin, 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you. And I would like to continue my questions for Mr. Nantal. You talked about the important role in research for your institution. I'd like to hear more about geography. Many of these colleges are located very close to populated areas. Colleges at 95% close to populations, including rural populations. So could you get better recognition, more equitable funding because you meet lots of needs, including a broader population? It's true. 95% of Canada's population is within 50 kilometers of a college, and 86% of Indigenous populations. So our colleges are located everywhere, and we work with local companies especially. So this helps us improve local economic situations. As I mentioned in my opening statement, at Niagara College, we've focused on industry sectors in demand in Niagara: manufacturing, food and beverage, environment, horticulture. So each college throughout Canada tends to do the same. So research that is done in partnership with not-for-profits in the region is like a contact sport. People need to come and try the new product you've developed with them, or new recipe, or a new beverage. People have to come and test the prototypes we may have come up with. Often when they'll adopt the technology, we'll help them install it in their manufacturing plant, for instance. So this proximity is very helpful, and we have better results, more effective outcomes when our role is played. We play our role in how a company progresses. If in general, are we protecting intellectual property? How do you commercialize it? We can help companies do that because we're so close to them geographically. we can have a guide enterprise even farther in. So proximity is important. And so with the funding agencies, we can help companies throughout Canada, like for FedEv, you have to be in a certain geographic location. And
the answer, and then I realized, I'm supposed to be keeping track of the time. So thank you very much for that, Mr. Boulris, for 2.5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Chair. Just a brief word to say I find it so interesting that my Conservative colleagues are worried about the price of food in the far north, but it's ironic. It's their government that cut the program to subsidize transport of food to the communities in the far north. So no doubt affecting the price of food in the far north. Mr. Nantel, I took notes in your you talk about improving this equity when it comes to access to money. What do you mean by that? Thanks for the question. Sometimes a program is designed to get university outcomes, targeting universities. What about then the colleges? And so they just add in the instructions, universities and the colleges. But that doesn't work, because if the desired outcomes or the type of intervention you want is a university-type intervention, the college will never be able to compete, because the way they're assessed, everything is geared, if I can use that word, to the universities. So when you design a program, and if you want the colleges to be part of that, you have to examine what colleges can bring to the table and then align the assessment criteria and the outcomes you're looking for with what colleges can provide. So if the college's, purpose or mission, has nothing to do with what's spelled out in the program, you're excluded. Yes, but unfortunately, you still see in the applications universities and colleges. In the preceding panel, university representatives, they said a lack of resources gave rise to competition between universities. Is that the same reality with colleges? Colleges, it's us against the world. We do help each other, to be able to share the cake. There's a lot more collaboration between colleges precisely because there isn't money. I don't like to put it that way. We would still collaborate if there was money, but there's more collaboration between the colleges.
Thank you so much, and thank you to the clerk for including the colleges in our witnesses here this morning. It's tremendous to hear the work going on at Aurora and the challenges that you face, not only with keeping research alive in the institution, but also the real challenges outside of the institution that you're working on. And Mr. Nantel, when you were talking about working with industry, and I graduated from Red River College in mechanical engineering technology, and my co-op job back in 1979 had to do with a local blind manufacturer, and I took that co-op experience over 30 years of experience in the field. I kept using that experience over and over and over. So thank you for the partnerships you have with our local businesses. So thank you both to Dr. Nantel and to Pippa Secombe-Het for being with us this morning, for giving us your insights on colleges and in terms of post-secondary institution research funding. If there's any further information I had to cut off a couple of times, please do feel welcome to send it in to the clerk. And for the members on the committee, just a heads up that the Indigenous knowledge study is going through translation right now. So we should be able to see a version 1 of that in early May, so we can take a look at the report on that, and thank you to the analysts for all your hard work on that. I'm looking forward to reading that report. Those testimonies were incredible. Okay, so let's get on with our days. Thank you, everybody, for being here, especially to our witnesses. And motion for adjournment. I see some nods around the room. Thank you.